you could do that, you could take applications, most boards don't, because that gets into slowing down the process, but you want an open process.
And how necessary do you think it is to have an interim?
Well, you have to have an interim because you have to have the interim becomes your superintendent for the period of November 1 through June 30th. So they become your superintendent during that period, under the law.
Unless,
You like those back row Baptists, Tyson? That's about like I am. We sit in the back.
That's right. We're there.
Mr. Minnie, how are you?
I'm fine, how are you, Cody?
I'm all right.
Boy, it's been beautiful weather, hasn't it?
It has.
That frost took care of the growth of everything.
Yep.
The trees will get pretty in the next few days.
Colton looked down, he said, "Is it snow?"
When you're young, you look forward to
Oh,
snow, and the
yeah.
older you get, the more you don't want it.
Yeah. No, it's not snow.
Glad that I moved my yard last night. I think for the last time
I really should do one more on mine, but
this is gonna sound silly. I like to do it one last time, just cause that first snow you get,
yeah.
looks like you got more snow. We love snow in my house. It's like, right, nothing better when you say right there's no grass, no road.
Lisa, on minutes for a regular meeting, the only thing I seen, I think Hillary's daughter was here at the last one. She's not on the members present.
Okay.
It was my only addition.
Katie.
Oh, Katie, because she.
Yes, yep. I went looking and I thought, maybe I'm wrong, and then I was like, I can't see, but I'm almost positive she was.
I didn't look that closely, so.
Well, that's that's just one thing I like to read over, and I was like, I think that's the only thing I found that was missing. It all looked good other than that.
Because they're on the parliamentary procedure together, going to Indianapolis.
Are they in FFA?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. They won first in the state, and
Already?
so they're going to the nationals to compete.
That's an impressive group. They came in, and it was last year that they
Yeah.
came in, and they
Yeah.
went through, and they gave them the promise and everything, and they, I mean, it was something to see.
Yeah, they're impressive. I was like, "Ugh, don't watch our meeting."
And they're so quick about it. I mean, just being
Yes.
quick about it, it was.
And it's actually like that when they do their meetings.
Yeah.
You know, it blew me away because,
It's almost reminded me like a skit, almost like they had rehearsed. What,
Yes.
Who's on first kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
almost to keep
Yes, but it's not, it's all, and when they go to their conventions and stuff, that's how they have their meetings. And if you wanna be heard, you have to jump up there first and, you know, so it's very different than anything I'd ever seen before.
Okay, it's 4:00, we're 4:03 really, and we're gonna go ahead and call this, a special meeting to order. We'll stand and do the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we got on our agenda an interim superintendent discussion. And the options that we have, what's your guys' feeling about that?
So 2 options, basically, you said. Yeah, just, please be informal.
My name is Howard O'Call. I'm the Executive Director of the West Virginia School Board Association. I have a handout that I think we might want to go through first, and it provides the background information that the board, I think, will need in terms of an interim superintendent. So if you'll pass one down, maybe we can start there, and then I think we can discuss options from there. I think there should be enough copies, I think.
I've read.
How we doing today, Tom?
All right. Jason, in case he showed up.
What I'll do is we'll just go through the way this is laid out here. And the first thing is an interim superintendent is, now it used to be an interim superintendent, and this is important in a little bit of background. They would serve 120 days. That's all the interim could serve, was 120 days. I think it'd be renewed, but essentially the legislature several years ago then determined that interim superintendent, someone appointed after July 1, could serve then until June 30, or till, in most contracts, a successor is elected. So in other words, the individual you select by law will serve from November 1 through June 30, unless, of course, you appoint a superintendent in the meantime for an effective date after January 1 of next year. And that individual then would agree that he or she would not continue to serve until June 30. And most contracts have provisions that allow that. In other words, they write it so the contract is through June 30, or something could be added like until a successor is appointed or something of that nature. But again, with the technical would be to June 30. That would mean that the person could go back into their position if there's someone in the school system or whatever. But again, the direct correlation of dates would be November 1 through June 30, and unless, again, we get into the provision in the contract we've talked about. Now, you, in selecting an interim superintendent, just like in selecting a superintendent or appointing a superintendent, you're not required to conduct a search or anything like that. It's your decision to appoint someone to that position. And the person that you appoint, so let's say you appoint someone on November 1, which you will be required to before then they could, of course, become the superintendent or apply for it if you do a search or something of that nature. And the important point here is another term of dates is January 1 to June 1 of next year. During that period, after January 1 and before June 1, then the county board is required to set the benefits, the contract, the duration of the contract for the county superintendent. So the window you have to select a successor to the interim superintendent would be from January 1 to June 1. And then that individual who may be appointed as an interim, of course, could apply for the superintendent position as well. And a lot of times, boards in the position you're in, they will use the period now between now and January 1 to consider how they're going to fill the position, if they're going to do a search, if they're going to get community involvement, whatever procedure they have. You can lay the groundwork now as long as you don't go into an official advertising of the position or making the notice that the position's available. So a lot of things can be done, like what are your options? You want to do a search? Do you want to do a process whereby the board simply has applications you review? Some boards do that. Most boards now, and we've worked with boards for years, most boards now simply receive applications. They don't do very elongated searches, but you would have the time to do that if you want. Then they look over the applications. They then determine from there who the successor to the person who might be appointed to the position. And once you determine that, then of course that individual either takes his office or her office on July 1, or if the contract's vacated earlier than that. And of course, there's all kinds of things here like A, B, and C. We won't get into all of those, but of course they have to certify they have the credentials for the position. They have to have medical things that are listed out here on page 2. They must post bond. Reside, now it says Upshur County, I don't know, it's really Gilmer County, or a contiguous county, and take the oath of office, and basically, that's essentially it. I mean, those are the requirements that are essentially for county superintendents as well, because what you're doing is you are using an interim superintendent who, for your purposes, will be the superintendent for the period of time that, November 1 until whatever. So those are the basic outlines here. Now, is there any questions about those? That's the basic, what we're dealing with. Now, when you get into process that you may use, most county boards will have a name or someone they think is interested in the position. They will usually work with that individual to see if they are, because you've got a timeline here. It's got to be done by October 31. Some boards will maybe ask people if they have an interest. They'll contact a board member or others and let that be known. But one good way, I think, would be, in my opinion, to start would be to have someone who's expressed an interest in the position. You all get together, you talk to that individual. If you're happy with that individual, his or her credentials, then you work from there. You probably do that next week. And then after next week, then you begin to put the motions in place, or the things in place, so you would have a superintendent by November 1. Yes, sir.
So there, for the interim, I haven't heard the word contract. There's not actually, is there a contract for the?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
There would be a contract.
There
Yeah, I
would
didn't
be.
get into that. Yeah, you would
Okay.
have, the interim superintendent, you have to, for appointment, it's interim. Take away the word interim, you got a superintendent, they'll have to have a contract. The contract can be, can be salary, it has to include salary and benefits and whatever else you have, and that would have to be agreed upon until the end of June or whatever, and it could have that opt-out part that we have. Yes, there'd be a contract.
Okay.
And it could be either the state contract, and I think you all use it, or it could be a customized contract that we do that has a little bit more specificity in it than the state contract does. So, yeah, so there would be a contract. And it could go into, it could get into all the different benefits superintendents do typically receive. So one approach, and the one I'd recommend, is talk to the individual who's expressed an interest, then sometime next week, and then if you're happy with that individual, then you could work from there, or if you feel like other people should be involved or interviewed or discussed, you could work it from there as well, so.
But the interim serves from November the 1st until the end of the year, or you can renew their interim contract for another year, right?
No, at the end of, the way I understand it, now this is kind of iffy, I have to agree. The way I understand it, their term would actually end on June 30.
30.
Then when their term ends on June 30, for the succeeding year or years, up to 4 years, they could enter into a new contract after July 1 for up to 1 to 4 years.
And, well,
That's how I understand it.
I understood that they could enter into another interim contract if the board hasn't selected a permanent person. They can serve a period of time, and then at the end of that year, but maybe that's after the
Yeah,
dates.
mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the cleanest way to do it is that between now and June the 30th of next year, then you contemplate having someone start on a 1 to 4 year contract beginning on July 1 of 2023, up to 1 to 4 years, which is what the code allows. So now if you can't select someone, you could give them a 1 year term, whoever it would be, they would still be your superintendent because you're out of the period of time that you could have a superintendent beginning on after July 1. And, you know, you need someone in place by June, you know, someone in place by July 1. So June 1 is the date where you have to have all the specificity of the contract and everything done. If you couldn't get that done, then I guess you could, after July 1, appoint another interim. But I think you'd have time to get all that completed by then.
I was looking at the code, and it seems to me like that you can renew an interim's contract.
They would still be the superintendent, though. In other
Yeah.
words, the interim only applies to what we're talking about, the window of time of November to June. But then after July 1, they would be a superintendent for a 1 to 4 year term.
Not an interim.
Not an interim, that's correct. Because interim, remember interim, the way I understand it, and of course I can research this, the way I understand it, interim applies only for someone after a broken term starting on, after July 1. So you're cleaner to do it after July 1 to have someone for 1 to 4 year term, unless that's not, you're not able to accomplish that. I think you would be, but if you're not, then again, you could have someone serving perhaps in that kind of capacity. But again, I'll look into that because working in the field on this, there are so many interpretations of that, but let me look at that again. But I think that is the case. The interim applies for the language we have here, so, you know, the short period of time. So basically, what I'm recommending is that you consider talking to someone who's expressed an interest in the position next week. If you're happy with that individual, then you take it from there. If you want to continue talking to other individuals, you would do so. But I think it's, you know, that's what I think would be the best thing to do for next week. Someone who's expressed an interest and see if they're have the credential. Make up, like I'll help you develop some questions you want to ask, like, you know, what are the issues and needs of the system? What will you attempt to do during the period of interim? What are your qualifications? What kind of experience have you had? Do you know the culture of the county? Things like that. I'll write all that down.
Okay.
So, yeah,
I was like,
well, yeah, I'll get all that down. But it is good when you would do this to talk to the individual and say, look, you know, this is a period of time for November to June. Tell us, or July, you know, June 30. Then ask a series of questions, just like you were interviewing someone, because this is important that you do that. So you see their credentials and see if they fit your needs and if they'll fit the culture of the county and the things you want to have accomplished. You've got a lot of time now, between now and June 30, to lay out some goals and plans and everything, particularly if you start that now and then continue to in January. So that's what I think I would do. If I were a board member, that might be the best use of your time, really, to do something like that. So.
Now, Dr. O'Call, would those be like this meeting, you know, the meeting, or we talk to somebody next week, would that be a special meeting or an emergency meeting?
Well, it couldn't be an emergency meeting, but it'd be a special meeting.
Okay.
And I think you need to do that, because you need to separate out what you're doing from your regular meeting. You can't really do that. You can make a motion tonight if you're happy with that to do that, but you would need a special meeting for that
Okay.
purpose. Now, there is emergency meetings under the law.
Okay.
But emergency meetings under the law would be a catastrophe, a building falls, or
Okay.
a storm,
Okay.
or a security, or something like that. But this would be a special meeting.
Okay.
Now, after that meeting next week, you could make a decision then, or you could wait and do, I hate to say this, but you could probably need another meeting to make a final decision. So you're happy with what you're doing.
Okay.
You have to be happy with this.
Yes.
You have to really know what you're doing and planning and wanting to get accomplished. And those things can be laid out when you talk to the individual next week.
Okay.
He said that we can talk and interview them in executive
Yes, that
session.
can be done in the executive session. There's a provision under the open meetings law that relates to the appointment of a public official, and that could be done in the executive session.
Okay.
Yeah, and you could have the amount of time you need to do that. Typically, structured interviews are the best thing to do for that, like everybody have 2 or 3 questions. If you give them to me, we can put them together in order, then everyone can have a question that's on your mind as a board member you'd like to ask.
Okay.
So, and they often overlap, but with boards, they're often, a little bit individualistic, but given your desires, needs, things you think should be accomplished, so.
One thing that I am looking at different than you're talking about,
Mhm.
and it just may be the way we think. In my opinion, we as a board need to decide what we're gonna do, what we want for an interim, how long we want them to serve, when we want them to serve.
Yes.
All those decisions.
Right.
And then look for somebody that fits that.
Well, that's an option the board would have. In other words, what you're saying is you would figure out all the things that you want, and then you would place that before either that individual that I'm referring to or,
Yeah, that
Okay.
individual, whatever.
yeah. I think under your agenda for tonight, I don't think that would be the time to do that, because you need to,
No.
yeah, you need, the only thing that I think you do need to consider very carefully is you got until October, 31. So that's gonna be, but that could be, you would need to do that in a special, you would need to do that in a meeting. I don't think you could do that any other means. You would need to figure that out in the meeting, which you could have next week. And then, of course, once you get all that completed, then you could, what I was thinking is, you have brought up a good point here. You could lay out everything that you want, or you could interview next week and the individual that I'm referring to, or however you do this, and ask them if they fit what you think, the board would need in the I think the main thing before the board is you've got a period of time that you're going to have an interim superintendent. As a result of that, then you could either do a meeting to determine what you need to accomplish then, or the questions you develop could be around that. In other words, what are the things you want to accomplish? They could be presented to that candidate. You could send me the questions and we could put it together that way. That's a board decision, that's something you all need to decide.
Now, I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Okay.
So, we hire an interim,
Mm-hmm.
but say, 4 months down the road, we're ready to start searching for a full-time.
Right.
We could start that search at any time, or we have to wait until after January 1st for that?
Well, you have to wait until after January 1. However, you could, if you start the search in January, you could fill the position maybe March, April. Then the individual who is the interim, if they are interested and they get the position, they would continue, of course, in that capacity. Or you could get someone else who would start a term. If the interim decides to vacate the contract early, they could start then, and then move into a full term starting on July 1, as I understand it.
Well, I guess it is November, so it's not like it's a
But
long time until January
we could
1st.
post it any time after the 1st of January.
Yeah.
And generally, these jobs become available at the 1st of March, because that's the date of the superintendent's evaluation.
That's correct.
And they do it resignation effective June, so forth.
Yeah.
So from March to the 1st of June is the time to find superintendents looking for a job.
Yeah.
So that's a good period.
That is typically
Because
correct.
this time of the year, it's just that somebody gets ill, somebody decides to
Right.
retire, or
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. But after January 1, then the period of time then, typically superintendents will, their evaluation, if their term ends on June 30 of next year, then they have to be evaluated by law by March 1. So typically that will determine when superintendents may seek another position or something like that. So that is correct.
So if we did the interim job the way you're talking about, we could post a job that after January 1 and then see what hits the market.
That's correct. What you would do is you would put out a notice that the position is available as of whenever it'd be, as of July 1.
July, yeah.
Then you can begin a search, or whatever your process is, which you would need to determine between now and then. Then you begin your process to determine how to fill the position for a term commencing on July 1 of next year.
So if we post that position, or put a notice out.
Yeah, you don't post that position because it's not a personnel
So
position.
you
Yeah,
notice.
you notice that, you make a
Okay.
notice of position vacancies, what we call, or
Okay.
availability.
So if
You-
we notice that in January,
Mhm.
and what if we don't find anyone we like? Are we committed to hiring at that point? Or
Well-
can we re-notice later?
Well, I think what Mr. Minnie was pointing out a moment ago in a way. The law says you must have a superintendent. So somehow you gotta have someone in place on July 1. So there has to be
But
a
we
super.
have, like, the interim would be there.
They would be there until June 30.
Yes, till June 30th, so
Right.
we would be covered on that.
That is correct.
So we notice once,
Right.
say we get no interest, or we get two
Right.
and we're not
Yeah.
interested in them. We're not under obligation to hire,
No,
okay.
no, when you.
I think that we should hire an interim based on, the period of time will be based on the time it takes us to find somebody. And at that time, that they would be replaced whoever we get. Don't have a specific date on there.
Correct, until successors appointed.
Until it's
Yeah,
filled, until
correct.
it's filled.
Mhm, that's correct.
We can put that in the contract.
I think you can
right?
place language like that in the It has to
Yeah.
say June 30 or until successor is, and
Yeah.
the individual would agree that
That's
his
right.
successor or her, yeah, that you could do it that way. I think the question before the board is, another question before the board might be, do you want to do a process where you get together first and determine the qualities you're looking for or things like that? Or do you want to meet with someone next week and then take it from there? That's really the question I think that's before the board, in a way,
I
there's
don't
pros
know
and
what
cons
the
of that
rest
either
you want,
way.
But I would like to get together and discuss what you want to do. I mean,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, like, maybe, if we could have another meeting this week to then start talking to whoever that has interest for next week, like, we can kind of meet. I don't know who we have interested. That's the question, like, we don't even know.
Yeah.
We haven't got together, this is
Right.
all.
well, that's when.
Well, you
can
can meet, you
post
can
it.
actually have a special meeting in 2 days, so you could have a meeting before the end of the week if you wanted to do that, yeah.
When you post it, that's when people will become interested,
Yeah.
I'm sure. It will be posted, it'll go out there
Or
on the
notice,
web.
send notice, I guess, we're looking for notice.
But now you're talking about, because we're not posting interim,
Yeah,
right?
you can't post interim, you're just looking,
You're-
can
so
you
you're-
post a notice for an interim?
Well, you
Or do
can.
you just have to be like, somebody heard it through the grapevine?
No, what I actually did, I researched that, because I never, you can actually say, hey, if you're interested in being an interim, give us, some kind of information about that, and go from there. I was looking at, getting something done in an expedient way, since it's October 31, and, then there were 2 or 3 people I contacted, and one individual that I, did express an interest in the position, so.
Okay.
Okay, but again.
For
you
here,
could-
our position?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. But you could meet at the end, you would have the time to meet at the end by the end of the week, I believe. Would that not be correct? Today is Monday, so you'd have time to meet Thursday, wouldn't it be correct? Yeah. If you put it out tomorrow, you could meet Thursday and have that discussion. You were going to move to next week, you could have it now. And then if you wanted to, you could then move next week to, bring someone in to talk to.
Yeah.
So that gets your preliminary out of the way this week. Next week,
Yes.
then you bring someone to talk to. That could work.
Because, if there's multiple candidates, we'll have to set that up for multiple times and
Yeah.
try to keep it all in one day.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could do something on Thursday about your preliminary. Next week, the individual I'm recommending, or, who's expressed an interest, I'm not recommending, but they've expressed an interest, then, they could come in and you talk to them, so. Is that,
Yep.
so you'd have 2 meetings. You'd have a meeting this week to
Yeah.
get ready for a meeting next week,
Right.
and then if you don't.
And then we still have to have another meeting.
Yeah,
right?
you'd have another meeting to really set the position,
Right, so
set
that-
the position. So that's important though, because you really need to deliberate on this to be sure you got a person who's serving more so a longer time than many interims serve. So you know what I'm saying? You need to be really sure that everyone's happy with the process and happy with the individuals,
So when do we find out who the person is?
Well, I'd like to reveal that to the board president, and then you all can share that information from there. Okay, you could do that.
So that would be before our meeting,
Well, I think,
At our next meeting.
yeah, that would be something you all could have then.
so like the Thursday meeting? or-
Thursday meeting, you could have that information. I'll get a resume, biography, all that by then, if you want that, for that individual. And then I think you could, take a look and move from there, so.
So at Thursday meeting, Lisa, we'll need an agenda for Thursday. What time do you guys wanna meet at the same time, 5 o'clock or whatever? It's good for you guys. I mean, doesn't matter.
I can't meet during the day because we got College Board of
I
Governors.
understand.
So 8 to
I
4 is
mean,
gonna
if
be
you
cut
wanna
off
meet
for
later,
me.
we can. If you wanna meet at that time, we can. It doesn't matter to me. It's
I
up
mean,
to you
5
guys.
would work for me. I just can't do during the
How about
day.
you, Brett? 5?
I'm flexible, probably more flexible than all you guys.
All right, we'll just have 4 o'clock again, unless anybody disagrees. How about you, Jason? Could you make 5?
I can probably make 5. It's gonna be difficult with it being homecoming week.
Let's make 5.
But yeah, I think we can do 5.
So the things we need for that meeting would be the resume of this individual, is that correct? Is that something like that?
Yeah.
And your process, you all need to think about.
Yeah, our process, like
Yeah, what questions you want to ask.
Our expectations, and
Exactly.
questions that we want.
That's a better way to say it, your expectations,
yeah,
things
our
like that.
expectations. That's,
Right.
I think, the big thing to find.
Right.
We're
Yeah, we
such a
need to get
small,
right.
small, town, this is the,
Yeah, I understand.
everybody knows what you eat kind of town,
Yeah,
so.
okay. All right.
So, we're gonna have a meeting Tuesday, and the agenda's gonna be to
Thursday.
discuss.
Thursday.
Thursday, to discuss the interim superintendent employment.
So it's still gonna be so just put on there discussion of interim superintendent.
Right.
Yeah, that
We'll
would.
not be
yeah.
doing any action.
Right. Okay, so I'll get you, now, for that, there's 2 ways that could be done too, possibly. One would be to, have just a free-flow discussion, or one would be to have a more structured discussion. It doesn't matter, whichever you all are more
Do
comfortable
like
with.
a work session.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, do you just
What
wanna
what I'm
discuss it?
interested in is getting everybody's opinion of what they want. I mean,
Yeah. If
the
you could-
board as a group needs to decide what they want to do.
yeah, and if you, there's another way when we work with boards, there's one way we could do that. You could get me that information from all of you, and I could give it back to you for the meeting, and it's already laid out all the things that you're all wanting, so to accomplish during that session. Or you could have a conversation like we are now, it's up to you. The advantage of the structured is you lay everything out, and of course you add things to it, because one question will maybe lead to another, but at least you know a path that you're going to take. So if everybody sends me 2 things they would like to know out of this, then I could give that to Mr. Minnie, and he could get that out to you all.
So we're sending, like 2 expectations or
Well-
like 2,
Well, expectations, experience.
Questions, like, interview questions.
Correct.
Why'd you leave the last place you were at?
Yeah, things of
That's
that.
the. Why aren't you there?
did you hear that he said that this person's retired, just since you brought that up?
Oh,
Just-
that,
Yeah,
the
they're
person
retired.
that you have
Yeah.
is retired, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So,
And
so,
also, he's got, this person has a lot of factors you need to consider, because if he's retired, he's social security age. If he takes a job, he's gonna lose his social security. If he's retired and he takes a job, it may
That's
affect
his.
his retirement. So those are things he's gonna have to check into.
Yeah,
yeah,
We can't do that, he needs to do
Right.
it.
yeah.
How it affects him, he's got to talk to us, and how it affects him and how it affects
Right.
us, or any other candidate that applies.
I like, Dr. O'Call's recommendation that the structured way, the 2 questions and have that format,
Yeah.
would probably be the way to go at it.
yeah, and just send me your whatever you define as expectations, like the things you mentioned a moment ago, things like
Yeah.
that. Experience, what type of boards have you worked with? What are some of the issues? What do you think needs to be accomplished?
What would you do in this circumstance?
Yep.
Do a little.
Yep. So just get those to me as quickly as you can, and I'll leave this with the secretary. I'll leave my contact information to get those to me, and then we'll put them together and give them to Mr. Minnie by Thursday, and then you all take it from there.
And I'm sure if everybody has 2 questions, that's a starting point, because I'll have more than a dozen.
Well, they'll come up as you talk. After you get through the structured part, then you use your time then to get into more of the follow-up questions or things like that. It's not an interview, a structured interview. It's trying to get everything laid on paper that you all think should be accomplished. It's a really good, I think it's a good process to do it that way. And that doesn't leave out anyone who wants to bring up someone says something you want to bring, how you want to get information.
Yeah, I served as an interim for 4 times, I think, 5 maybe.
Mhm.
And sometimes it was a short period of time, and other times it was a longer period
Yeah.
of time. So, but each time I had a contract that
Mhm.
spelled
You will
out what
have,
was
yeah.
gonna happen to me during
Yeah.
that period of time, and how much I was gonna be paid and all
Right.
that. And that's what we have to
Oh, that's,
find out.
that's a good point, money.
Well, that's correct. I mean, all those things would come after you talk with the individual or
Yeah.
whoever you work with. Yeah, that is a
Do
consideration.
we, is that something we negotiate with them, or that's something we decide what to offer, or how does that?
Is that predetermined?
Well, basically, I think you negotiate
Yeah,
that.
we negotiate
You
the check.
negotiate that. I don't think, it used to be county boards would say salary shall not exceed, or
Yeah.
current salary is. Well, that's really not germane. You negotiate the salary when you get someone you're interested in, so you take it from there.
You'd have to find something that they'll agree to and you.
Well, that's correct. And it can either be done by, the president is authorized to do that, or someone else on behalf of the board, or a member carrying that message to the individual that you're going to be looking at as you go through the process. So expectations, however you define that, process things too. So if you can get those to me, then I'll put that together for Mr. Minnie for Thursday. And I'll be available Thursday if you need me, but I don't really think you'll need me at that point, so.
Is there anything that we need to be specific about requesting of the outgoing superintendent?
Well, that's a good question. I think I would, the things you might want to ask are, what are some projects that need to be completed before
Yeah.
June 30? What is the status of major issues
Okay,
or
you have to
projects
slow down
facing?
if I'm-
Well, I'm trying to think of those, okay. But those, what I think you want to do in that case would be, what are some projects that need to be, completed, before the end of the fiscal year or school year? I think another thing would be, what are some major issues that may arise between now and then that the interim will deal with, or the superintendent will deal with? Any advice that the superintendent outgoing has, for selection, successor, things like that. I think those are kind of the three major things you want to get at, because you're really doing a transition. So if you can get
Yeah.
to things like that.
Do you want us to send this to your email? Is that what?
Yeah, if you send it to my email address, we can get that woven into part of the discussion too.
Everybody has Howard's email.
I can tell you what it is.
Yeah, that's what,
It's HOCULL at WV.
I'm sorry,
HOCULL
HOCULL.
at WVSBA.org.
So that's HO@WVSBA.org.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
No spaces or anything.
No, it's HOCULL
All tied
at.
together.
Yeah, at. Mhm.
I'm just sending you a test.
All right, okay. Okay. Now, as far as what was brought up about talking with the outgoing superintendent, that would probably be something the board can do as part of, before her term concludes. And you should do that. That's
Yeah.
very important, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. All right.
Would that be in a separate special meeting?
I don't think it would have to be you've got two special meetings coming, you could do it yeah.
We can throw that one in there. Good.
Or you could have, just have a conversation with the superintendent
Maybe
delivered
the
through the
board
board
president
president.
could have
That's
the
the better way to do it.
conversation.
I think the board president would talk to
Yeah.
the superintendent, get that information and bring it to you all. That's the easiest way to handle that, and the most, I think, the simplest, really.
Okay, so I guess I'm just left wondering on this agenda item for tonight, what else is there to question or ask? Because I mean, if we're gonna wait until Thursday,
Yeah.
then we really don't need anything for that item.
I think we just put it on there. in
You
case
put it
we
on there,
needed
you don't
to.
need a motion or anything now, you've already worked everything out, I
Yeah,
think.
so
So,
I think
yeah.
we just put it on there. in
It's
case.
logistical what you've done now, essentially. So Thursday then would be when you've already got basically laid out for Thursday. Yeah, you don't need a motion for tonight or anything, so. Okay.
Well, that was all the questions I think I had.
So is everything kind of lined out then for your Thursday meeting, the expectations? Sometime between now and the end of the year, at the end of October, you'll be speaking with the superintendent. The questions we have here, things in process, needs to be handled, things of that nature, so. And then Thursday, you'll have the questions, the expectations, and then whatever part of process you may want, so.
I think I understand
Okay.
for the moment.
And be sure when you do expectations, like things you want to ask or things that need, you know, things that get accomplished, things of that nature, so. Okay.
Any other words of advice?
Well, this is a very important decision. I mean, you've got a long period of time. You've got January 1 till you get your search completed or your process for your superintendent. You're gonna get information from the current superintendent about projects that are outstanding. So you've got a path and a direction. And it's not something you have to fill tonight. It's something you've got a little bit of time between now and the end of the month, so.
I'd just like to say a couple of things to the board while you're here about hiring the superintendent or an interim superintendent. Because a lot of these people's not been involved in education, they haven't gone through these processes, they don't understand. In every employee in the county system that's employed, there's direct rules and regulations that apply to that employment, like standards that you have to meet to
Right.
meet that employment. The standards for superintendent are a lot less. Board members, you have the right to do about anything you want to hiring a superintendent, as long as they have the qualifications and education to meet the requirements. You don't have to consider all the things that you do, like if you're hiring
The
a teacher.
rubric.
or
That's a
some
real,
personnel.
that's a very good
So-
point, Mr. Minnie. That is a
So
good
the
point.
board, you have total authority. You could throw everything out the door and say, I've got a neighbor down here that's got his degree and I think he ought to be
Yeah,
superintendent.
now there's the only caveat. They do have to have the certification for that
I
position.
mean,
But beyond
certification.
that, you're right, Mr. Minnie, beyond that,
That's it.
there are code duties for the superintendent.
Yes.
But getting that person to be superintendent, there is no specified that's one of the free areas of the code. There's no
That's right.
specified
That's
process.
that's the most important thing that a Board of Education can do is select a superintendent.
That's correct.
And that is the most freedom they have to do anything.
That's
Really,
correct.
It is, selecting a
is.
superintendent. So I just wanted the board to
That's
be
your
aware.
day-to-day individual, yes. Right. Okay. So try to get those to me, so I can put that together for Thursday, for your meeting. And, you know, then next week, or whatever you decide for that meeting, you could have it, any day next week if you need to, so.
So it's HOCall@WSVA.org. I
That's-
probably got it on my phone. But
You got it correct, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
you got it. Okay.
Well, we thank you, Howard.
Well,
for
appreciate
coming.
that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
appreciate it.
We'll
Okay,
be in
thank you.
touch with you.
All righty, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Okay. And, there's one.
We need to make a motion to adjourn.
Well, if you guys, we got a few minutes, it's gonna be 5. If you wanna discuss the situation farther, we might, among ourselves. This is one time you're gonna have a chance to do it without calling a meeting. And Brett, you've had some input about what you think needs to be done. Does anybody else this? And like I said, you know, you've heard what Howard said, and as far as employment goes, there's only 5 people here is gonna make a decision.
I think by, we were already talking about, an intern that's retired. So we know even if we get away with being able to hire this intern, they're not gonna stay. This isn't gonna be a permanent fix.
No.
We're gonna have to
That's not
keep
true.
looking. So we already know that. I mean,
No,
that's-
we don't.
Well, I know that too.
Well, let me tell you why you don't, because Howard just told me that
Yeah.
the guy might want the job permanently.
Oh, okay.
So let me tell you, when you deal with these things, you find a lot of things out along the way. I found that out. And the State Department comes in here and they got people in mind. Who do you think they got in mind? People they know, people they've worked with, people that they think that do a good job.
Yeah.
And in my experience, these counties now, when they hire a superintendent and they're looking for somebody that's got 30 years' experience, 2 years to go to retirement, they're gonna come in there and put out their time because they're getting that big money for retirement. So if you're looking at somebody that you want to make a difference, you need to look at somebody that makes a difference. That's just the way I think about it. You guys may feel that a bit differently. But just because you've worked 30 years, if you worked 30 years and retired and drawn a good retirement, why do you want to quit and be an interim? You know, and then this is all things we need to ask that person
Yeah.
when they show up. So I think those are the kinds of hard questions that we need to ask and get answers to. And then the commitment. We don't have to commit to more than whatever we want to. We can commit to, till the end of the year, from January 1 to June 30th.
I mean, personally, I kind of, like the idea of writing the interim contract so that if we choose to post in January and find and like you said, I guess if this guy applies for the position too, then he would just go in the applicant pool.
And his.
But his interim
yes,
contract, I would like it to say that if
Until
we.
filled.
Yeah,
He can serve until filled, or June 30th.
I'm not sold on the, yeah, I just.
not sold on what?
I would just, I mean, I know teachers from all over the state, and that's what I'm sure you do. I just know how, especially principals, maybe not as much superintendents, but just being right here in Gilmer County and seeing all the superintendents, you know, that's not a long, there's no longevity in being a superintendent in any one county. There's not very many superintendents out there right now that have been in the county for 20 years or 10 years for even that matter. So, with that being said, I just, you know, I don't want to pick up someone else's problem. I just see a
Right.
lot of and I know that but that might be somebody else trying to pass the buck too. And that's why I think we just need to
Well,
go
yeah,
in
I
an
mean,
open mind to everybody.
yeah.
I don't want to say, hey, they're bringing me a good person. This is probably a good
Yeah,
person.
I mean,
I
I
don't
wanna
want to go in there
know-
with that mindset. is all
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying.
wanna know, you know, I wanna see resumes and everything, but
I just.
as far as the contract, I would just like for us to be able to make a change with a permanent person if we want to.
And I think that this is, a, you know, this, I mean, I'm gonna say it like this. Are these on? Okay, this stinks. You know, just being a new
Which-
board member that we're, you know, that we're going right into this. But with that, I also see the good side, you know. We ought to see this as being a sculptor, and we're gonna get a fresh piece of clay, and if we don't mold and find somebody that molds into what we want it to be and how we wanna work with them, then that's our ignorance. And, you know, we should be really
Yeah.
slow, methodical. when
This
we're
is the most
trying to find
important
what we want.
decision.
Yeah, what we're finding. So I just don't wanna be in a rush no matter what.
Yeah.
But I'm open.
Do you have, anybody else have any other questions? Cody, do you have anything?
I agree with what Brett said, and, yeah.
I
Yep.
think the question here is, do we want somebody from Charleston to decide who's gonna be the superintendent here? Or do we wanna decide? That's what you need to think about.
Yeah, I think we need to look at their option, look at
Right.
them all.
There's no problem with looking at anything. But in the end, you'll have to make that decision. Anybody have anything else?
I think it's
We'll meet Thursday.
5, we decided on 4 or 5.
Five,
Five.
cause Jason can't, he's got homecoming. And we'll send our questions or expectations to Howard. Okay, have a motion for adjournment. Anybody got anything else?
No.
Second.
That thing just keeps following me around. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we got a few minutes before the next meeting, so. You wanna go?